Okay, today we're starting Shabbat Daf Yutet. Today's shir is dedicated Lezecher Nishma Yitzchak ben Yechiel Eliezer Zichrono Livracha by Margie Zwiebel, his daughter. Refuah Shlema for Yaakov Yehuda ben Chana ve'Esther Rosa bat Sarah Mindel by Debbie and Ben Sion Niederberg. Refuah Shlema for Amalia Sigal ben bat Feigel Ruth Bechaim by Rabbi Shosh Dvorsky, wishing Amalia full and speedy recovery and refuah nefesh for her loving family, and a refuah shlema by Jean Klempner for her father Elimelech ben Malka. A list of refuah shlemot are growing, unfortunately. Okay, Tanu Rabbanit. We're starting 3 lines from the bottom of Yud Chet Amud Bet. Beit Shammai Omrim. We're now continuing in a whole list. We were to start at the topic yesterday or the day before, about all sorts of things that one can't do before Shabbat in preparation for Shabbat or in concern of what might happen on Shabbat, what it will look like, or that someone's kelim might be working. So now we're going to have something in kind of out of left field, not having to do with Shabbat, but having to do with Pesach, which is interesting because that's where we're heading toward right now. Tanu Rabbanit. Beit Shammai Omrim. Lo yimkor adam chemtzo lenochri elim ken yodea bo sheyechlek kodem haPesach. Divrei Beit Shammai. You can't sell your chametz to a non-Jew unless you know that he's going to eat it all before Pesach. Ubeit Hillel omrim kol zman shemutar leochlo mutar lemochlo. If you're allowed to eat it, then you're allowed to sell it. Rabbi Yehuda omer, in other words, as long as it's right before Pesach comes in, right, or the Isur, the fact that we're forbidden to eat chametz from earlier in the day of Erev Pesach, but as long as it's before that, no problem. Rabbi Yehuda Omer kuta chabavli. This is my favorite food. We'll get to it in a minute. V'chol minei kutach, and all types of kutachs, asur limkor shloshim yom kodem haPesach. He obviously holds like Beit Shammai, who says you can't sell it before Pesach as long as he can. You have to sell it in a time period that the non-Jew could actually finish it before Pesach. So he talks about foods that last a long time, and because they last a long time, therefore you have to actually sell it 30 days before, because otherwise it might still be around in the non-Jew's possession. So first of all, what is kutach? Kutach, and why is it called the kutach habavli? That's even more interesting. The kutach was something, we don't know exactly what ingredients were in it, but we know the ingredients that are halachic ingredients. So for example, it has milk in it. Okay, it's actually spoiled milk. It sounds a little like yogurt or something like that. It has moldy bread or pieces of bread in it. Okay, they were, again, I don't know exactly moldy the way we think moldy, but it must have not been really moldy, like you would throw it out, but some sort of bread that was left for a long time. So first of all, it's relevant for Pesach because it has bread. It's relevant for milk and meat because it has milk in it. It has salt in it, so it's relevant for things that are salted. So it has a lot, it comes up a lot in the Gemara. I once years ago did with some friends, Karen Miller was one of them, anyone who knows her. And we did a party of Talmudic foods, and we tried to recreate we didn't exactly, but we thought maybe we should try to recreate the kutach habavli. Why is it called kutach habavli? And this is the funny part, because apparently I read this at in Eretz Israel, in Israel, they thought this was a disgusting food, which makes sense. And they called it the kutach habavli because the Bavlim ate it. So that was their, there was a lot of tension. Bavli, you're the ones living in Israel. So they kind of said, oh, the kutach habavli, that disgusting food. And here you see that there's other minei kutach, right? It's also kol minei kutach, other types of kutach also. This was something that they would probably dip their food in. It was more, in the Korban they called it a spice. I don't know if I would actually use the word spice because it's not like a spice, but it's something that you would dip your food into, and it was something that would last a while. I was thinking like people have in their fridge, pesto and olive dip and things like that. It's something along those lines. And it obviously would last a long time. So that's all about, again, having your chametz, right? You can't give it to a non-Jew until he can get rid of it. It's similar to these Shabbat issues. Tanu Rabbanan, another braita. Notnim mezonot lefnei hakelev b'chatzer. You can give food to your dog in your courtyard. Now this is, first of all, why dog? Dogs are definitely the least favorite animals by the Tanaim. Here it's interesting that they specifically say a dog. First of all, there's a whole issue with feeding animals on Shabbat. You can't feed animals on Shabbat because it's considered a tircha. Okay, it's work to feed your animals, and therefore you're not supposed to feed them unless it's the category of what's called mezonot hanalech. If the responsibility of feeding is on you, and then the animals have no other way to eat, then you're allowed to. So now why did they choose a dog out of everybody else? So all the other animals, because other animals you would work for you. They do malacha. Your cows you would use for plowing, and your animals you can milk were for milking. We're going to actually get to some sources about that later. So those animals, all the more so you're going to feed them. But here they're telling you even your dog, which theoretically isn't doing any work for you, you still can feed the dog even on Shabbat. Now what's the concern here? The concern is that maybe if you give it to the dog in the chatzer, in the courtyard, he might take it out into the public thoroughfare. And then your food that's yours will be taken out from Rishut Yachid to Rishut Rabim, from the private to the public. So they say here that you're allowed to do it even if the dog might take it out, and it might look like the dog is taking that you wanted the dog to take your possessions outside. By the way, this specifically says mizonot, which shows that if it's not food, then you can't, because the dog might take it out, and then again, it will look like you sent the dog to take something out to Rishut Rabim. But nitalovi, so you're allowed to give it to him in your courtyard. Now the assumption is here in this courtyard you're allowed to carry. You're just not allowed to carry it outside. So you're allowed to give it to him in the courtyard without a problem. Nitalovi yatsa enis kakimo. Now if the dog decides to take the food outside, that's not a problem. You don't have to stop him. Kayotsebo, likewise, notnim mizonot lifnei anochri b'chatzer. You can give mizonot to a non-Jew in the chatzer. Okay. Now nitalovi yatsa enis kakimo. Now if he takes them out, also, it's not an issue. If he decides to take the food out, you don't have to worry. That's his issue, not yours. Now, again, this goes in sync with what we saw before, that you can't give a non-Jew, remember, you can't sell him anything. You can't pile him up with stuff. Right? But Beit Hillel was matirin. Okay, Beit Hillel says, no, it's not a problem. Now, some people say this source seems to say food, and maybe only food and not other items. Now, what's the issue with the nochri? So Tosfot, there's very interesting Tosfot here, and he says, theoretically, how can the nochri, if we talk about this category of giving someone food is work. So we could give your dogs food because they're your animals and they're relying on you for food. Now the non-Jew is not relying on you for food. It's his own person. He can get his own food. So Tosfot says something very interesting. And he says in another source, it actually says that something else is forbidden to do on Shabbat, relating to a nochri, because ein mizonotav alecha, right? You're not responsible for his food, so you're not allowed to. So why here do we allow it? So if you look at the end of Tosfot, Dibor Matchil Notnim Mizonot LeNochri, the first one on the page, he says, "V'yesh lomar kevan demefarnesim aniyei nochrim im aniyei Yisrael mishum darkei shalom." This is okay. There's a category of things called darkei shalom, which is in order to have peaceful relationships with people, certain things are allowed. So they say and certain things one's supposed to do. So what is this saying? There's a source that says that you're supposed to support the non-Jewish, right? You're supposed to give financial assistance to non-Jewish poor people with the poor people, right? With the Jews. In other words, you're responsible to actually give them food. In which case, so Tosfot says, "Chashiv k'tzat mizonotav alecha." Now, it's Tosfot stuff because there's one source that says ein mizonotav alecha, and there's another source here which seems to imply you are responsible to give them food. So how does he reconcile it? He says, well, because of darkei shalom, you're responsible to help feed non-Jews. Therefore, it's somewhat mizonotav alecha, and that's how we resolve it. A little bit yes, a little bit no. So that's why when it comes, and then he distinguishes. When it's a d'oraita, well, we don't allow it. But when it's a d'Rabbanan, in our case, it's just d'Rabbanan because you're giving the nochri food before Shabbat, right? So it's the only concern is a d'Rabbanan concern that maybe he'll take it out and people will think that you're giving it to him to take out to Rishut Rabim and that you want it and some kind of issue like that. Because of that, since we're somewhat responsible, or we are responsible, because we're responsible to feed them also, therefore it becomes our responsibility and it overrides the d'Rabbanan of the issue of Shabbat. Okay, next case. So wait, before we go on to the next case, now the Gemara says, so again, if he takes it out, that's not my problem. So hatu lamali, why did you need to give the case both of the dog and of the non-Jew? Hainu hach, they seem to be the same thing basically. You're giving something to someone else who you're responsible for or somewhat responsible for, and it's not your problem if they take it out. So ma'u detema hai rami ale v'hai lo rami ale kamash malan. Even if you're responsible to feed the non-Jew because of tzedakah purposes, still your responsibility is really to yourself and to your animals. So the dog is your responsibility. The non-Jew is not your direct responsibility. So you might have thought it's not allowed. Kamash malan, that it is in fact allowed. Okay. Next source, Tana Rabbanan. Lo yaskir adam kelav l'nochli be'erev Shabbat. You can't rent your equipment. Okay, here we're talking about equipment with which one would do work, like your millstone or something like that. You can't rent it out to an achui on erev Shabbat. But b'dalid u'behei mutar. On Wednesday or Thursday, it's allowed. Now you wonder, why does it say Wednesday and Thursday and not Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? Okay, we'll get to that in a few minutes. So on Wednesday and Thursday, it's allowed, and obviously the beginning of the week, it's allowed. Okay, now why is this? This is a concern that, again, it will look like you're giving it to the non-Jew. Okay, actually, let me clarify. Tosfot says right away, if you look at the next Tosfot, he says, Ein lefaresh mishum shvitat kelim. This is not a concern of shvitat kelim. Now again, if we say it's shvitat kelim, then that source must be Beit Shammai. And this is something we're going to have throughout. They keep throwing in all these Tannaitic sources. Today we're full of Tannaitic sources that talk about these issues of what can and can't be done before Shabbat. And it doesn't necessarily say in all of them who the author is. So if you say this is an issue of Shvitat Kelim, then you could say it's Beit Shammai and then we don't hold that way. So he says, no, this doesn't have to do with Shvitat Kelim. He says, what's the issue? It looks like you're getting paid to do something on Shabbat. Because it looks like you're getting paid for Shabbat. Now, you're not allowed to get paid for Shabbat. However, how do people do it? How do we hire people to work for us on Shabbat? We use what's called havla'ah. Havla'ah means you actually have to hire someone for more than just Shabbat, and then you pay them for the time. You could pay them double time or triple time for the time they worked for you before Shabbat. As long as you kind of include everything together, it's called absorbed. It's absorbed into that, and then it's allowed. So now the issue is if you lend in your equipment just before Shabbat or on any time on Friday, it looks like you're getting paid just for Shabbat. And the Rashba basically says it looks like you're only renting for a day and not necessarily for more than that, in which case it looks like it's all for Shabbat, and that's a problem. So now they get to another interesting issue, which is Ein meshachim igrot biyad nochri be'erev Shabbat. Okay, again, you can't send mail for non-Jews to deliver for you on Erev Shabbat. B'dalid u'behei mutar, on Wednesday and Thursday you're allowed to. Amru alav Rabbi Yossi HaKohen, v'amr la Rabbi Yossi HaChasid. It was either Rabbi Yossi HaKohen the story was said about, or maybe Rabbi Yossi HaChasid. Shelo nimtzah ktav yado biyad nochri me'olam. He never ever gave, right? He made sure the mailman was always Jewish. Okay, you didn't want to have any issue of someone delivering his mail on Shabbat. Tanu Rabbanan, now we're going to see a braita about this. Ein meshalchin igeret biyad nochri erev Shabbat, ela in ken kotzetz lo damim. Now we're going to get to a whole different issue. I'll set up the distinction first in an easier way to see, which is someone who gets paid by the hour versus someone who gets paid for a job. If someone gets paid for the hour, then it's like you're paying them for exactly their work. If someone gets paid for a job, and you say, finish this from start to finish, then they can decide when they want to finish it. It's already in their hands because you're paying them for a job. So therefore, the Tanna Kama says here, you can't send letters to an Ochri unless if you set aside a price from the beginning and said, this is the price I'm paying you. I'm not paying you by the hour. I'm paying you for the job. So then in the words of Rashi, now the non-Jew, it's his job at this point. He's not doing it for you. You already came up with a price. Since you came up with a price and you said, I'm paying you this for the job, now the job is the responsibility of the non-Jews, in which case he can do it whenever he wants. He can do it on Shabbat if he wants. He can do it on Sunday, and that doesn't affect you in any way. So you can't do it on Erev Shabbat unless you set a price, and then it's fine. Beit Shammai omrim kedei sheyagia lebeito. Beit Shammai says you have to get to the house of the person who he's delivering it to. And Beit Hillel omrim kedei sheyagia lebayit hasamuch lechoman. In other words, there has to be enough time, according to Beit Shammai, for him to get to his house. According to Beit Hillel, for him to get to the first house in the city. We saw this distinction before. But something doesn't make sense in this braita. V'halo kitzetz. But didn't we just say if you set a price, then it's totally fine? So then what's going on here? So Amarav, and as the braita makes no sense. It starts up and says you can do it as long as you set a price. And then it starts distinguishing between, well, how far do you have to get? Does he have to be able to get to the person's house, or does he have to be able to get to the wall of the city? But we just said he could do it in any case because it's his responsibility at this point. Amarav, Sheshan Hachi Kamra. This is the way you should read the braita. V'im lo kitzetz. In other words, the first part is saying if you set a price. If you set a price, it doesn't matter. You could do it a minute before Shabbat, it sounds like. V'im lo kitzetz, but if you didn't set a price, Beit Shammai omrim ad sheyagia lebeito, So it's only in the case, right, if you didn't set a price, then the issue becomes Beit Shammai says you have to be able to get to the house you're delivering it to, and Beit Hillel says next to the, right, as soon as you get into the walls of the city. V'hamar Reisha ein mishachin. But they say, no, that still doesn't make sense, because what does it say in the first line? It says you can't send a letter unless you set a price, which sounds like if you don't set a price, you can't send a letter at all. So how do we start saying depends if where it depends how far you can get before Shabbat. So now they're going to say there's actually three things going on here. Lo kasha. Ha de kviya beidor b'mata, v'ha de lo kviya beidor b'mata. It depends whether there's a mail, a post office in the city. Okay, now the post office was a place where it's, maybe you would say more like a post office boxes or something like that, where if there's a set place where people would bring the mail to, and it's very easy for the mailman to get there, then you can say that, then we're going to have this machloket Beit Shammai Beit Hillel about whether it has to get to actually the house or it has to get just to the Beit Doar, right, to the place where they bring it. But if there isn't such a thing, then we don't allow it at all. That's ein shochin igeret biyad nochri, unless you set a price. So we have three things. We have two basic distinctions. If you set a price, you don't set a price. If you set a price, you could do it whenever. If you don't set a price, then it depends on whether there's a Beit Doar in the city or there's not. Some people say it's not the Beit Doar, it's a Beit Shalit. They had a different girsa. There's like the house of the head of the city, and maybe the mail went there, and then also people went there to collect their mail. And anyway, there's a bit of a question about what exactly this Beit Doar is. Okay, next. This is my favorite. So yeah, I wrote a whole article about a whole project on this in university. It was very interesting. You'll see why in a minute. Okay, all of a sudden now we start to see that there's certain things that you can do 3 days before Shabbat. Now this is going to explain to us why the other sources said b'dalid u'behei mutarim, because it was in contrast to all these other things that we're now going to learn, that even 3 days before Shabbat, one is not allowed to do various things. Now, what's unique about those 3 days before Shabbat? First of all, you're allowed to make Havdalah, for example, until Tuesday, right? Until Tuesday, we assume, let's say you didn't make Havdalah, till Tuesday is basically considered back to the previous week, and from Wednesday, it's considered toward the next week. So that could be one reason. Another reason could be 3 days, maybe certain of these things, like we saw about the launderer, you couldn't give the white clothing. You had to give it 3 days before, because certain things take 3 days. So now we're going to talk about boat travel. So boat travel, according to this, one can't go out in a boat within 3 days of Shabbat. Now this is a very problematic halacha, because people were doing boat travel all the time. And if you limited the amount of days that people could do boat travel, it was really difficult. So what we're going to see happen, and I'm going to, before we even read further on, I'm just going to read from on the sheet to today's sheet, the Meiri, actually. Okay, so the sheet, you can go look on the website. I forgot to put it on the Zoom. Maybe I can try to do it while I speak. But what we end up having here is that, one second. So if you look at your sheet now, the Meiri says, and this is why this is fascinating, okay, the Mefarshim had no idea what to do with this boat travel thing. Now there's number one, they didn't really understand it. Number two, all the more so, they saw that nobody was makpid on this. Everybody was using boat travel all days of the week, even Friday. And there was nobody who came out and said, you can't do this. So it became this huge issue as to, and then he says, when we talk kach per shuha, this is what happens in development of halacha. This is a fascinating study in terms of development of halacha, because you have this very clear halacha. It says it very black and white. You cannot go out on a boat less than 3 days before Shabbat. However, what was going on was that people were all doing boat travel. Now, why? First of all, business, right? Everything was dependent on boat travel. So if you couldn't go on boat travel, it was a huge problem. So what did the rabbis do? Well, they tried to come up with reasons as to why this is, right, why this is asur, in which case we could come up with, well, when is it going to be mutar? Okay, so if you come up with a reason, you can say, oh, that's only true in this case and not in other cases. Because this issue was so rampant that everybody was doing it, all the Mefarshim had to come up with, well, what do we think the reason is? Okay, my whole paper was actually, many people say that it all happened in the Middle Ages. And in the Middle Ages, there was a lot of boat travel. And because of that, they tried coming up with excuses and trying to come up with the reasons why it was allowed. What I tried to prove in my paper was that, and this we'll see today, there's a lot of Tannaitic sources, and we're not going to see all the sources on this, but there's a lot of different Tannaitic sources even. So, and my claim was that even in the time of the Tannaim, there were many different, it was already an issue. It wasn't just an issue in the Middle Ages, but 1,000 years before, in the time of the rabbis of the Mishnah, even then it was an issue, and they had these sources, but yet there were a lot of sources that seemed to indicate that there were heterim. Okay, so let's start reading. So, in which cases? You already see, not in every case. So, lidvar harishut. That's if you're going for pleasure. Well, we'll see what reshut is. Aval lidvar mitzvah shapir dami. If you're going to do a mitzvah, it sounds like from the pshat here, if you're going to do a mitzvah, it's allowed. Anything else is asur. So the first big heter, the Rav Yah gives, it's at the bottom. I made a chart with a bunch of the opinions on the sheet. The Rav Yah says, oh, everything is dvar mitzvah except for tiyul. Okay? As long as you're not going on a pleasure trip, even business is considered mitzvah. And therefore, he matirs, once you do that, then it's almost anything, just not, don't go on a cruise. Okay? This is the relevant thing, by the way. Can you go on a cruise? Can you get on a cruise ship that leaves 3 days before Shabbat? Okay, so now, the next thing they say, which is interesting, okay, you have to, now the assumption here is that it's a non-Jew running the boat, and you have to tell them, listen, I'll get on this boat under the condition that you stop the boat on Shabbat, right? Imagine getting on a cruise ship and saying, okay, I'll join this cruise ship, just make sure on Shabbat, no boat travel. So what does Rebbe say? Well, you have to kind of make an agreement with him, but he actually doesn't have to listen to you. Okay, that's a little bit strange what he means here. I forget now where I saw this, but I saw something yesterday where it said that, oh, I know, it was a footnote in the Koran. They quoted someone and it said, let me open it. It's a very interesting footnote. It said that part of the issue here is that the Jews wanted the non-Jews to know that that they took Shabbat seriously. In other words, that was an issue that if we didn't, if we just got on a boat and just didn't care about and showed the non-Jews, we didn't care about Shabbat. He quotes in the name of the Gaonim, says it's due to deference toward heaven, so that the Gentile will not think that the Jews are indifferent to the sanctity of Shabbat, right? Which is very interesting, and that makes sense. Why you would then say, listen, we really need you to stop. If you don't want to listen to me, okay, so you don't want to listen to me. Rashba Gomer, Eino tzarich. No, you don't need that whole stipulation is not necessary. Umitzur letzidon afilu be'erev Shabbat mutal. If you're going from Tzur to Tzidon, that's in Lebanon, right? So it's not a far distance between the two of them. Then even on Erev Shabbat, it's allowed. So you see it started off with saying no, and then it started saying all these ways that it's allowed. I'll give you a few of the different reasons that the rabbis give for this. The Rif and the Rambam, the Rabbeinu Chanal says this whole has to do with tchumim, and because of that, he says it's only if the ground under the water is less than 10 tefachim off the ground, and therefore he says in the Yam HaGadol, everybody goes in the water, and it's, everyone goes on boats, and it's not a problem. And with that, he matired a lot. He says, as long as the water isn't shallow, it's not a problem. The Rif and the Rambam say the issue is that you're not going to have Oneg Shabbat. You might get seasick on the boat. So if you go a few days before, your body will get used to it. The Baal HaMa'or says it looks like you're doing something that you're doing something that you might have to do. It might be pikuach nefesh on Shabbat, and we don't want you to do that. Where you're putting yourself in a situation where it might cause chilul Shabbat, even though the chilul Shabbat at that point will be allowed. But why put yourself in that situation? Which, by the way, has very interesting ramifications. For example, you shouldn't do elective surgery a few days before Shabbat because you might end up getting yourself into a situation. Another issue could be well, we're going to see, like war. You can't start a war 3 days before Shabbat because you might get into a situation. So there's a whole bunch of things, ramifications from that. Rashbam, I think, is the most interesting, or I don't know, they're all interesting, but the Rashbam says, oh, this is all about Shvitat Kelim, and therefore it's only Beit Shammai, and therefore we don't hold by it at all. So he kind of neutralizes the entire issue, because as soon as you say it's Beit Shammai who's the author of that, well, then we don't hold like Beit Shammai, and it's very easy. Okay, there's a few more. I'm not going to read them, but you can look on the sheet. There's a few more listed there. What was fascinating about this is because each rabbi in his own community was dealing with the fact that everybody was doing this, and each one kind of, why is it so interesting? Each one used their creative energies to come up with, well, how can I justify what the minhag that people are doing is? And then they each come up with all different reasons. And again, if we were doing a be'iyun shir, we could show, what each one's proof was and where he gets it from and what the other sources he used to help him figure it, but we're not going to do that today because we're doing a daf shir. Tanu Rabbanit. Here comes the war one, okay? So by the way, if I just mention very quickly, so the proof for the Bala Ma'or who says it's that you don't put yourself in a situation where you might come to Pikuach Nefesh proves it from the context, right? The next source, right, we could say, oh, well, they must be of the same topic, and this seems to be that's the topic. Tanu Rabbanan, so you can't start a war or a siege on a city. This is obviously if it's not in self-defense, right? You're doing it, you're kind of going on the attack. But if you did start anyway, ein mafsikin, you don't have to stop. Even Shammai agrees to this. Ad ridita, this is what a pasuk that's talking about when you siege a city, and it says asher hiosayim milchama ad ridita, okay, until you finish conquering. So afilu b'Shabbat, right? You can't have a siege on a city and then say, oh, taking a break for today, right? I'll come back tomorrow. So since you can't do that, we allow it even if you started it, even if you weren't allowed to start it and you did anyway, then you can continue. The other big issue I forgot to mention is that some people say, in order to, again, negate this issue, that we were only talking about in a boat that was run by Jews. And if the boat or the majority of the people were Jews, even if it's run by non-Jews, which, by the way, makes sense that you would then go to the owner and say, listen, we're mostly Jews. Can you stop the boat on Shabbat? And therefore, in a boat that's mostly non-Jews, it's not an issue at all, which was, again, a way of monitoring boat travel. Okay, Tanya. Amar Rabbi Tzadok. Okay, this was the end of the Mishnah, where they said, Noagim hayu beit Abba, they would bring the kli lavan, the white clothing, to the launderer before Shabbat, right? 3 days before Shabbat. So Amar Rabbi Shimon Tanya Amar Rabbi Tzadok Kachayam Nago Shel Beit Rabban Gamliel Shayu Nonim Klei Lavan Lekovesh Shlosha Yamim Kodem LeShabbat Utzvuin Afilu BeErev Shabbat. The colored clothing they would give even on Erev Shabbat. Umi Divrehem Lamadim, from what they say, what did we learn? Shalevanim Kashim LeKavsan Yoter Min HaTzivoni. Okay, that's obvious, right? It obviously means that the white ones were harder to clean than the colored ones. So first of all, what's the relevance? Well, we're going to see the relevance right now. This is also kind of funny. He brought his clothes to colored clothing to the launderer. Amarle kama bai dilaves. He says, Abai says, how much money do you want? You have to remember, Abai had no parents. He was adopted. He didn't have a lot of money. He's always stressed about the money thing. Okay, how much is it going to cost? Amarle kidachivara, just like the white clothing. Amarle, what are you trying to pull the wool over my face? Right? He says, what do you mean? The rabbis already told me there's a difference between lavan and colored clothing. I'm not going to pay you the same thing for the white clothing than I do for the colored. So what do you see here? That from the Gemara, you can learn practicality of how to function in the shuk, right? That, he said, oh, look, the rabbis taught me about basics in life, right? This goes back to what we always say, that the rabbis view themselves as teaching you about everything. So for business purposes, so they don't get taken advantage of, this is important to know. Abai Nas is another thing, if you want some good business advice. When you're giving your clothes, you should measure them before you bring them in. And then measure them when you get them back. If they're larger than afsidei, then you must have stretched them out. In ibatzir, if they're shorter than afsidei, then you must have shrunk your clothing because you used hot water. And right, so basically he says you should check and don't rely on people being honest about their business. Okay. Vishavin elu ve'elu shetoani. So now we say we have this issue because in the Mishnah we said we get back to this. The last line of the Mishnah is even though there's big Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, Machloket, and everything, there's this one case that they both agree about that you can put the beam on the olives or the grapes to get more juice out. So now we're going to see why. Ma'ishna kulu degazru bu Beit Shammai, u'ma'ishna korot Beit Haba be'igulei agat shelo gazru delo gazru. Right? What's the difference? In the ones that if you would do it on Shabbat, you'd be chayav korban chatat, meaning it's asur midoraita. Right? That's like a catchphrase for it's forbidden from the Torah. right? Because if you do it b'shogeg, you have to bring the sacrifice. Then, but the other ones, right? Then we forbid it. Erev Shabbat im chashicha. You can't even do it right before dark. But korot lehabadi gulei dve'at the avelu b'Shabbat lo machayev chatat. It's only aser midrabanan lo gasru. So therefore, they didn't make a kseva. Why? So some people say this is an issue of nolad. You've created something new. You had olives, and now you're making oil. But a lot of we're going to go with the other approach, which is it's tolada of dash. Dash is when you take the wheat, you separate the wheat from the chaff. It's taking food from the bad part. So now you're taking, right, so it's separating something out from within something else. So you're taking the liquid out of the olive. Now, if you already smashed them before, we're going to learn that there were three processes. There was the risuk, dicha, and shchika, okay, which is some sort of process of pressing them, then chopping them or pounding on them, and then pounding on them again. There were three processes they did, and then they put the korat beit havada. So now, in the beginning, right before you do the risuk and start pressing them, well then it would be a problem of dash. But once you already did that, theoretically, if you just left these without putting the korat beit havada on, eventually everything would seep out of them, and therefore you're allowed to do it. So now the Gemara says, right, so therefore that's only asur midrabanan, and therefore if you do it before Shabbat, it's okay. Man tana dechomidi da'ati mimela shapir damin. Who's the one who says, who's the Tana who holds, like our Mishnah, that if it's going to anyway, the juices will anyway seep out, then it's not asur midoraita? Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, Rabbi Yishmael. It's Rabbi Yishmael. This time we're going to have two answers, and then we're going to say why doesn't each bring the source of the other. Hashum v'habosar v'hamalilot sheriskanmi v'od yom. Rabbi Yishmael omer yigmor mishetachshach. Rabbi Akiva omer lo yigmor. Okay, what does this mean? This is garlic. Apparently, they would use the juice of the garlic and grapes that are not fully ripe, and mililot. These were the grains of the wheat that they would also squeeze liquid out of. If you did the risuk already from Miba'od Yom, then you can continue it throughout Shabbat. Okay, it's not a problem to finish. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Elazar, okay, Rabbi Elazar, the Amora says it's Rabbi Elazar the Tana's opinion, which is Rabbi Elazar ben Pidat. Ditnan, as it says, Halot Dvash Sheriskan Erev Shabbat. If you started pressing or pounding on the, I don't know exactly what the act is, but on the beehive, right, where the honeycomb. If you start pressing on the honeycomb before Shabbat, v'yatzu me'atzman, and then they came out on Shabbat, asur. For Rabbi Elazar, matir, Rabbi Elazar allows anything that came out of the honeycomb on Shabbat. Okay, it's not a problem, even though it wasn't. What's the issue here? It wasn't ready before Shabbat. Usually, let's say you have fruits on a tree. If they fall on Shabbat, you can't eat them. But there's other issues also of Trumot and Masra, but let's say that's not the issue. So basically, if the stuff comes out of the honeycomb on Shabbat, you're allowed to eat it according to Rabbi Elazar. So he says that's the opinion that says, again, if it will come out on its own, then it's allowed. So we have one opinion that talks about grapes and garlic and the wheat kernels, and then we have a different one that talks about honeycombs. So Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, who said the first one, my time alo amarka Rabbi Elazar. Why didn't he hold like Rabbi Elazar, who said, why didn't we learn it from the honeycomb case? Amar lecha hatam hu de meikara ochel ulevasof ochel. Hacha meikara ochel v'hashta mashke. These cases aren't comparable. In one case, it's food coming out of food. That's honey. It's in the honeycomb, and then it comes out from the honeycomb. It's basically the same thing. It was food before, it's food after. With the olives and the grapes, it's grapes before and juice after. So it started out as solid, then became a liquid. So he says you can't learn one from the other. So that sounds like reasonable. So now we have to explain Rabbi Elazar. So why did Rabbi Elazar think that these were comparable? Rabbi Elazar amar lecha, hashamina le Rabbi Elazar, afilu zeitim va'anavim nami shari. He says, no, because I learned that Rabbi Elazar, even though he said it about the honeycomb, I know he also says it about olives and grapes. How do I know this? Right? How did they know anything in those days? When Rav Hoshai came from Nahardea, he brought a braita with him. What braita? And that's when he showed up on the scene, he taught us the following braita. And in that braita, it says, Zeitim va'anavim. The topic of that braita is specifically olives and grapes. Sheriskan me'erev Shabbat v'yatzu me'atzman. If you press them before Shabbat, and then more juice came out on Shabbat, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, right? So Tanakama says asurin, they're forbidden. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, mitirin. They say this is allowed, okay? Because even though it wasn't prepared from before Shabbat, it would have come out anyway, and therefore it's allowed. So what do you see? That he says it in both cases. So now that's pretty clear then that matches our, like the whole question was who's the author of our Mishnah. It would sound like it's that. So now we have to go back to Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina and say, well, if it's so obvious there, why didn't you hold that way? So then they say, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina. So how do we explain him? Braita lo shmi'aleh. He never heard this braita before. He only heard the one about the honeycomb, and he thought that they were different. Okay, again, we don't really know what Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina was holding. This is all the Gemara trying to put words into his mouth and think about what he might have said if he were here. Rabbi Elazar, my time alone, Marka Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Bar Chanina. So now why didn't Rabbi Elazar bring the case where it would have been much more obvious to bring this braita that said, Bosar, which are unripe grapes, if that can be done, then obviously this can be done. And then show, Rabbi Shmuel matches our opinion here. So my time alone, Marka Rabbi Yosef, Bar Chanina. Amar Lacha is the way the Gemara says, right? He would have said if he were here to explain himself, Lav Itmar Allah, wasn't it said on that source? Amar Rabbi Bar Chanina, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, B'mechusarim dicha, dechule amalu pli. If you haven't done, if you did the risuk, remember there's 3 shlavim, risuk, dicha, and shchika. If you haven't done dicha, kule amalu plige, nobody actually allows it. Ki plige b'mechusarin shchika. It's only if you didn't do shchika. Okay, but if you didn't do dicha, if you did the first 2 processes, then we have a machloket. Okay, that's what the machloket Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva is about. But mechusarim dicha, nobody thinks so. Tahaninami kemuchasarim dicha. But our case, we're assuming now. What did it say? It said anavim sheriskan. Right? We're talking about you did risuk. Risuk means you didn't do dicha. Now it's a little bit complicated because the source about the Mishnah about the shum habosar hamalilot, it also only says riskan. But what they're basically going to say is, well, there's a difference between riskan and there's one source is when you only did risuk, and one source is when you did risuk and dicha. And then the machloket's only if you did risuk and dicha. And our case is where you didn't do dicha either. And Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel both think it's a problem. And here comes in Rabbi Elazar who says, I have Rabbi Elazar. He says if the honey comes okay, then this is okay. Even though there, right, because there was only risuk, it wasn't dicha. And therefore, that would prove, I can prove it from the honeycomb case. I can't prove it from the machloket Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva. Now we're just going to see, we don't really have Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina's response to this, but Hore Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Ishmael. He didn't really care about what Rabbi Elazar said. He said, no, I still hold like Rabbi Ishmael, and it can be done. Okay. Now we're going to move on to, and maybe if you say this had to do with Nola, then we can lead from here into Muktzah. Now what's Muktzah? Muktzah, we usually think something, right, like a telephone is Muktzah. But the real category of Muktzah, and the highest level of Muktzah is something, it really, the root of the word Muktzah means set aside. Muktzah is something that you set aside not to be used on Shabbat. So, and then there's a whole debate, there's a famous debate, Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda about how far we take Muktzah, and Rabbi Shimon was very lenient, and Rabbi Yehuda was more stringent about it. So now we're going to have a few cases and talk about whether they're Muktzah or not. Shemen Shabbat, I assume because we're talking about the olive press, because of this they're getting into this, because otherwise it doesn't really relate to our issue. Oil that was left in the bottom of the wine press, which generally they would use, whatever was left there, they would give as salary to the people who worked in the olive press. They would give it as salary to the people who worked in the olive press. So whatever oil was left in the bottom, they would give as salary to them. And the mats that they would use the mats were special mats that they used in the olive press. So Rav Aser Ushmol Shari. Let's say you wanted a mat on Shabbat. Could you take a mat from there? No. Let's say you wanted olive oil. You couldn't take the olive oil that was left because those 2 things are designated. One is designated as salary and one is designated for use in the olive press. Ushmol Shari, Shmuel says, no, it's not a problem because Shmuel, we're going to see, held like Rabbi Shimon, who was very lenient in terms of what's considered muktzah. Since these have other uses, right, the highest level of muktzah is rocks. Rocks have no use at all. Okay? So, but these have a use. They can be used. It's olive oil, it's right. So he wouldn't say this is muktzah. Hani karche dezuze, Rav Aser, Ushmuel Share. Okay, this is right. What's the car? Right. These are these mats that they would use, pairs of mats that they would use in the boats. So again, this is something used for business purposes, or they were designated for specific use in the boats. So again, Rav Aser, Ushmuel Share. Amar Rav Nachman. Eiz lechava, Rachel legizata, Tarnagolet lebetzata, Torah lerigia, Betmari leiska, Rav Aser Shmuel Amar Mutar. Another machloket between them. If you have a goat that's used specifically, you use for milking, and a sheep for shearing, and a rooster for a hen for the eggs, and an ox for plowing, and the dates for business purposes to sell, all these things are set aside and you're not allowed to use them on Shabbat. And Shmuel says it's not a problem. The kamifla gave a pluk to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, and they say, and their machloket is based on the machloket, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon. There was a Talmud who basically passed in this city. The name Bacharta de Argis is a city. Like Rabbi Shimon, Shamte Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna put him into excommunication. Now this sounds pretty serious, especially passing like Rabbi Shimon. So they say, Rabbi Shimon Svirale. So why'd you do this? But Atre de Rav Havi, he was living in the city of Rav, and here you start to learn that if you're in the city of someone and they hold a certain way, you can't go against him, right? And that's like a public offense to him, and therefore they put this guy in Nidoi for what he did. So lo ibayle lemea bar hachi, you shouldn't have done this, right? You should be smart about where you are and what you do depending on where you're living. Hane trei talmidei, another issue that seems totally unrelated. This we're going to learn much more. We'll go into depth when we get there in another 100 pages or so in Perek Kol Kitvei, about a fire starts burning on Shabbat in your house. What are you allowed to save and how are you allowed to save it? So there were trei talmidei, two talmidim, chad matziv b'chad mana, v'chad matziv b'arba v'chamesh mana. One took it out all in one basket, and one took it out in 4 or 5 baskets. V'kamiflagei b'plugta d'Rabba bar Zavda v'Rav Huna. Not so clear why the Gemara brought this here, but they say that's the basic machloket that we're going to learn there about whether you could do it all in one kli or whether you could do it in 4 or 5 kelim. Maybe because we're showing students who hold by different rabbis and in machlokot, so they bring up this story. I'm not exactly sure why. Okay, we'll start with the Mishnah tomorrow. And so we'll learn Shabbat Av tomorrow. Have a good day, everyone.